look at. So as everyone joins, I just want to welcome everyone to this panel for ICA Plays On. This is the International Clarinet Association's first virtual event, and we think it's going pretty well so far. I hope everyone has attended an event before. This is our second to last panel. We have one more after this, but all of these are being recorded, and you should be able to watch all of them on the Facebook page, or we will be posting them to our YouTube channel next week after Jessica and I have had maybe a day off to rest some, but we're collecting all the resources that people mention throughout this. So if you have anything that you'd like to contribute, any articles, any studies, any links, any equipment recommendation, anything at all, feel free to just type that in the chat. Jessica and I will be looking at that to create this resource for everyone. Before we get started, I guess a few announcements. If you haven't checked out the virtual exhibit hall, Jessica put that together and it's really cool. You can tour the exhibits virtually and check out some cool clarinet products that people would have been displaying at Clarinet Fest this year. So Jessica beat me to it. She knows the drill by now. She put in the link in the chat there. There's also the Threadless shop where you can purchase ICA merchandise. So you'll see me drinking tea from the ICA coffee cup that I have. They have t-shirts, tank tops, beach towels, water bottles, stickers, anything you want really. They could put a logo on anything. So you can check that out as well. I think other than that, Jessica, unless I'm missing anything, we could go ahead and get started.
Yes, and some of the resources that have been discussed during previous panels, and as well as this one, will be embedded into the ICA Plays On page on the clarinet.org website, and we'll pull those resources into the document as well. But if you want to see, for example, Megan has a great video about cleaning your instruments that we've shared, and I'll put the link in the chat as well. That's on clarinet.org/ICA Plays On 2020. You can view those there.
Great. And before we introduce all of the really talented and knowledgeable panelists today, I thought that it would be good to announce that the ICA is starting a new web series entirely on the coronavirus, on COVID-19. So if anyone watching this has any resources or articles about teaching or performing or motivation or anything related to the coronavirus and clarinet, please feel free to email those to me or Jessica. My email is assistant@clarinet.org. Jessica's is edo@clarinet.org, and we can look at those and see if they're okay for submission to the series. So we're trying to combine everything into a resource for everyone as we prepare for the future during all of this. And I think that's everything that I have to say. So if everyone wants to go around and introduce yourself, feel free to jump right in.
I can go first. I am Meghan Taylor. I'm a PhD student this close to candidacy at UNT right now. I'm studying a musician's health at the Texas Center for Performing Arts Health. My primary area of research has been working in the secondary school system to integrate health education into the music classroom, so band, choir, and orchestra in Texas. How I kind of fit into this conversation this past year, we partnered with Denton Independent School District to put together some COVID resources that Jessica mentioned earlier that are now on our website.
I guess I can go next. I'm Paula Corley. I'm the outgoing pedagogy chair for ICA. My last column is about to come out. We're going to publish it early. It's called The Times They Are Changing. So today I'm happy to share some of the research that I have found for everybody. Besides that, I live in Wimberley, Texas, out in the country. It's very quiet. I have a greyhound and a husband that's a great cook. So I'd say that's a win.
I'll go next. I'm Shawn Copeland. I am the clarinet teacher at the University of Idaho, way up here in Moscow, Idaho. I'm actually in Seattle right now. I've been here since March. I got stuck here when the quarantine happened and spent the rest of my semester living here in Seattle. I'm here to offer my experience and my thoughts from my background in Alexander technique and as an Alexander technique teacher. And I'm hoping to talk to you about kind of the hidden effects of this and how we're all responding to the stress of this in our bodies.
Well, I'm used to being a Z and going last, but I'll jump in here. So I'm Stephanie Zelnick. I'm the professor of clarinet at the University of Kansas. And like every other university professor, had to rapidly change to going to online teaching back in March, and just kind of here to share some of my experiences and a lot of experiences of my colleagues and what seems to be working and not working, and some resources. And I'm also here to kind of get some good ideas also. So I'm looking forward to this, right?
And I will go last. Stephanie kind of beat me to the punch. My name is Vanessa Davis, and I teach at middle school, high schools, and college in the Texas area, all over North Texas and East Texas. And part of, I would say, an integral part of my teaching philosophy is integrating issues of health and wellness, as well as mental health and wellness, as well as physical health and wellness, into how students are approaching the clarinet at all those three different sort of grade levels.
So I thought we would start off by talking about the unique risks posed to clarinetists and any advice you have to clean, disinfect, or protect yourself from the coronavirus if you have any studies, or general germs, anything at all. So we'll start with that. Feel free to jump in.
Okay, well, I'm never short on information, right? I'd like to share a study with you and the findings as they apply to what we do as clarinetists. My message today is it's good to read and keep up and take suggestions from people, but make sure that whatever protocols you institute are based on science. That's really important. And research where people have actually studied this and not hearsay. Some of the things that we see on social media, I'm just using that as an example. I'm not being critical, but it can be not true. So I would want everybody to really base their decisions on science. Okay, so in May, there was a study at the Freiburg Institute. Jenny will probably have to help me with my pronunciation of German. There were 5 physicians. 2 of them had music degrees. Their areas of specialty included virology, ear, nose, throat, critical care, all, they ran the gamut. And they took their data and did their studies with the Bamberg Symphony and the chorus and so forth. And they set this study up. And it's a fascinating study. And I'm going to share the link, and it will be also in the pedagogy column in the magazine, and probably with Jenny and Jessica soon. But here's what they found. The transmission of the virus either comes through aerosols or droplets in the air. Clarinet does not produce droplets. They actually measured it because when we blow into a brass instrument or to a woodwind instrument, the air goes into the horn, right? So there's no really air escaping that could produce the droplets. Now, there is one instrument that is an exception. Sorry, flute players, but it's you. Okay, so because of the nature of the way the tone is produced on flute, which we all know, the edge tone, then they measured droplet dispersal at just over 3 feet, okay, from flute. Okay, so that's the exception. And that's good to know. What their recommendations are, and I'm going to go to my notes here, their recommendations are this. The aerosols that can be emitted, there's no conclusive evidence that the clarinet produces aerosols, which might come through the tone holes. They looked at it, but the research is not conclusive. So they don't know for sure. The recommendations are performance distancing absolutely works. And the study said conclusively that we needed to be 6.5 feet apart. That's what they found, because they even measured singers, like they floated fog in front of a singer's voice. And 6.5 feet away, there was no evidence of aerosol or droplet. And it is just one study. I mean, it's not like, there aren't going to be others. but even with singers, they didn't find it. So 6.5 feet apart. They say that we should all be teaching online until we can get something done, vaccine or some type of protection. But if you are going to teach in person, the recommendations are, no question, the 6.5 feet distance between you and your student. The teacher should wear a face mask. The third thing is there really should be a plexiglass partition in your studio so that there is some extra layer of protection. And what they found to me that was really important is ventilation. A lot of us have studios. Mine is really small at Texas Lutheran University. So they recommend every 15 minutes that you take a ventilation break and that you leave the studio and have the student leave the studio as well, because they suggest that that ventilation will help mitigate any aerosols or anything that might be lingering in the air. The aerosols are really kind of the danger zone because they're lightweight and they float, whereas the droplets, once they're produced, they go about a little bit over 3 feet and land on the floor. But this study it has a lot of information, a lot more than I'm giving you right now. So we'll put the link up so that you can read it. It was beautifully edited by a gentleman in the United States. And I think it's significant because it's the first one of its kind. There are going to be more. The CBDNA organization is doing one this summer in Colorado, and somebody here or on the panel may know something about that one. I don't think it's been completed yet, but again, my message is please pay attention to the science.
I could jump in really quick here and say I echo Paula's sentiments. Please, please, please pay attention to the science. I know in the Clarinet Care Clinic that we had on Friday, someone commented that they used rubbing alcohol to disinfect their clarinet, and it was not so good. So please go to scientifically backed articles for all of these resources.
I just want to come in and be a third on echoing that. And, you know, it's almost like if you were looking at one of these epidemiologists or virologists looking at clarinet and kind of assuming that they were going to put together all the information on how to successfully play a concert on clarinet just from different articles and in snippets that they would see online, it would be kind of ridiculous in some ways. You know, that's us kind of looking at this. There's so little that we know, and just knowing how little we know and just relying on that science-based evidence is so important. You know, from the little bit that I can possibly conceive of at all, just like Paula is saying about the aerosols, and it seems like that study that's coming out of Colorado is something that a lot of scientists are pointing to as being kind of an important study that will tell us a lot more about how this behaves. There is an interesting link that was on that great resource. It's a Facebook page. It's teaching, higher ed teaching in the time of COVID-19. And I don't know, I'm sure you all saw this. It was Kimberly Prather, who's a professor at UC San Diego. And she came on there and she was talking a lot about just in general how these aerosols behave and a lot about viral load. And it was really interesting to hear a professor kind of talk about this. And she explains it in a pretty succinct way. I can put that in the comments after. Again, as a non-scientist, I'm not sure exactly how to interpret it, but the aerosols are kind of a big deal with how this behaves. And ventilation system, she seemed to drive home inside versus outside as a whole different ball game on this. But basically what she said also is that there's a lot of studies coming out right now, and we should be basing everything on what those studies say in the future.
I'll echo all of that and just add, watch the dates, especially if you're using social media as your primary incoming resource for this information. Print the articles out, watch the dates on them, and you know we're fortunate enough that we're watching the science of this evolve in real time. It may be the first time that something like this has happened in any of our lifetimes. So stay up to date, because a new study can come out tomorrow and suddenly everything switches around. We're seeing that with the whole face mask conversation and things like that. So just watch the dates on the data as it comes out.
I think, oh, sorry.
Oh, go for it, sorry.
I was just going to say, I totally agree with everything that's been said so far, but I also just want to impart on everyone listening that there are other things that we can also do, or we should be doing, to make sure that we're safe, like hand washing, face mask wearing, all of those things that you're hearing on social media, that all can apply to clarinet playing as well. Like before you get out your instrument, you should go to the bathroom and wash your hands. If you're a studio teacher, having like a little pump of hand sanitizer by the door, those Lysol wipes to spray off the door handles, you know, bringing your own music stand could even be an option for a lot of people. Like anything that we can do to limit the contact of inner contact of heavily touched objects would be really great. And then I think when you're putting your mouthpiece and stuff together, just being cognizant of not touching the things that are going to go in your mouth with your hands. So like the tips of your reeds and the actual facing of your mouthpiece. All of those kinds of things can contribute to sickness too. Sometimes when I'm playing, like you might put your pencil in your mouth for a second, like all those things, like we just need to commit to stop doing as a culture of clarinetists. And I think that that can also take us a step further in health and safety as we go forward.
I think a lot of us don't realize just how much we touch our face and our eyes and your hair and things like that. So make it a challenge for yourself during the day to count the number of times that you catch yourself touching your face, and just becoming more aware of that will help to reduce this it's just actually good hygiene, to be honest. I made a joke the other day that a lot of people are realizing that they didn't have the best hygiene prior to this situation. So it's really good to be aware of all of that.
So I see a comment, cleaning reeds, just a friendly PSA, clean your phones too, clean everything that can be cleaned, make sure that you are cleaning it with a proper solution so you don't damage anything. But let's talk a little bit about cleaning reeds and cleaning mouthpieces and anything that we might come into contact with for a while.
I would like to preface this by just saying I'm not an instrument repair person, so you should always listen to those people about exactly how to clean things. But I did look into the reed cleaning a little bit just because I was curious. In that University of Iowa white paper that Jessica shared in the chat earlier, they talked about that. Right now, there's not really any CDC or FDA guidelines about exactly how you should clean reeds, just because they're a complex, like porous material that can have, you know, food particles and other respiratory secretions in them. But they recommended in the paper just to make sure that you're handling your own reeds and cleaning reed equipment if you're making reeds like for your studio and you have like a set of shared equipment, cleaning that kind of stuff. As far as mouthpiece cleaning, the resource that I developed with my team at the Texas Center for Performing Arts Health that Jessica also shared earlier is for clarinetists. It's a basic mouthpiece cleaning video, basically just soaking it in some soapy water, because we really wanted to make the resource down to like the lowest common denominator of students. Not all students at the time that we made the video would have had access to alcohol because it was out in like all the stores, or another cleaning agent that would be appropriate for a mouthpiece. So that's what that video is. I also listened to the Clarinet podcast this week, and Richard Hawkins was on, and he had a really good mouthpiece cleaning protocol that he talked about on that show. Sorry, my dog's in the background here. So if you are interested in like a more complex cleaning method, I would recommend listening to that podcast episode. I think it's episode number 135, maybe. I'll post it in the chat. But yeah, those are my two takeaways from cleaning.
And we also talked about that actually, I think at the Clarinet Care shop, I think Melanie had mentioned how to clean mouthpieces. She suggested, if I'm not mistaken, a mixture of half water and half white vinegar, or possibly lemon juice or other solutions like that. So that's on the Clarinet Care panel that you can go back and listen to. And she mentioned that some studies, I would have to check and see which ones, said that if you're worried about your clarinet having any germs like that, then you can leave it in its case for 3 to 5 days and it would go away. So I'll have to listen back to make sure that we cite those sources properly.
Yeah, and I just shared a link for, as Jenny mentioned, we're doing an article series on our website about this very thing. And our first article is by Catherine Breeden, and she talks about deep cleaning the clarinet and what that looks like, and gives you a step-by-step process along with what kind of equipment you're going to need to make that happen if you can't get to a repair person or anything like that. So be sure to check that article out and look for the future articles in that series as we get them posted.
I also thought of one more thing. Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
Just quickly, all the accessories you have in your case, like your reed case, tuner, metronome, all those things that you touch frequently, those can also be wiped off with a Clorox wipe or something of that nature too, just to keep everything that's in your area while you're playing the clarinet kind of sterilized and safe.
I was just going to say, we all play in groups and ensembles, and if we go back to those, or if and when, what the other person does has a lot to do with our health and safety, right? Because we can control what we do, but we can't necessarily control what somebody else does. The study that I mentioned before talked about brass players, for instance, like in school groups. This is kind of far-fetched, but they suggested that the brass students go outside, you know, to empty their slides and blow spit out of the horn. That's not a good idea. Blowing air to clean spit out of a key, like we all do that, it's not a good idea. So they recommended distancing again. Their two recommendations were distancing when we play, and then of course when we're teaching mass. But yeah, so be aware of what other people are doing around you so you can be safe too.
Hi, Sheri. Thank you for joining us.
Apologize for being late. I was thinking 2 o'clock Mountain Time.
Oh, no, not a problem. I'm just glad that you're here, and I know these time zones can get tricky, so thank you so much for joining in for this. We were just talking about sanitizing and disinfecting reeds and mouthpieces, if you have anything to say. And I just saw another question pop up. What about UV? I lost it, but UV, like reed disinfectors, what do we think of those?
Well, UV is an excellent disinfector, and it zaps this virus for sure. So I would think that would be an excellent way to disinfect reeds and mouthpieces.
Sheri, could you just introduce yourself for anyone that's not familiar with who you are and what you do?
Okay, my name is Sheri Rolf. I'm a physician, board certified in otolaryngology, head and neck surgery, and I also have a DMA in clarinet performance.
So feel free, everyone, just sort of jump in and talk about anything that you'd like about disinfecting clarinet products, clarinet accessories. I think it's pretty clear by now, tuners and accessories that aren't necessarily pertinent to the clarinet, those can easily be disinfected with like Clorox wipes or anything like that. But it's really the clarinet equipment that we have to be a little bit more careful with so we don't destroy our prized possession. So any other advice on that?
Well, one thing to remember is that at least the surfaces that you touch, that's not a particularly, the virus isn't, can be spread that way, but that's not the primary way that in which it is spread. It's an aerosolized virus. So, you know, when you breathe, obviously you're going to put virus into the clarinet if you have the virus. And so then the question becomes, how long does that virus live on the surface of the clarinet? Plastics seem to be, the virus seems to survive on plastics for a longer period of time than most other substances. And so wood, I'm not really sure. I guess my thought would be, it's your clarinet, don't let anybody else play it.
I'm actually glad you mentioned that. There was a question just a second ago about sharing instruments, maybe not personal instruments, but particularly like in methods classes or situations where people have to share instruments or school-owned auxiliary instruments. What advice or protocol do we have on that situation?
You know, I haven't heard any specific recommendations about that. Again, if it's a brass instrument, the virus is only going to be viable in that for maybe a couple of days. And as long as the mouthpieces are sanitized, no big deal. Now, flutes probably would fall into that same category. Again, clarinets, like in a methods class, they're going to be made out of plastic. And so the virus is going to have a longer survival time there. Is there any particular way that I know of disinfecting the inside of a clarinet, even a plastic one, without doing damage to the pads and so forth? And the answer, I do not know the answer to that.
Anyone else care to chime in?
I mean, I would second that we don't exactly know how long to let things sit for. I know our local school district at the end of the semester, they decided when they brought everything in, they're just going to let it all sit for a couple weeks. So maybe, and the example was in the chat was a woodwind methods class. Maybe if you're able to kind of put the instruments on some sort of rotation where they have that week to 10 day like buffer period between people playing it. I know it's going to be tricky. You're probably going to get a lot less playing time, which you really need for those woodwind methods classes, which is a bummer. But if that's what you have to do to be safe, maybe it's worth exploring.
Yeah, I agree with Megan. I don't think there's any really perfect way to clean anything. I mean, they don't know about surfaces. I mean, they're saying it's logical that the virus lives there, but they don't know for how long. And like Sheri said, we don't know on wood versus plastic versus anything else. But there is a homemade concoction that I use. Some of you may have seen it, and it's primitive, but it works. And so far it hasn't like removed the surface of my mouthpiece. It's a 70-30 grain alcohol to water. And I have it in a spray bottle, a very fine mist. And you can spray it on your mouthpiece and let it air out. And I got this recipe from an infectious disease physician in Asheville, North Carolina, when we lived there. So he said that was the best way for just a common person to clean something and get rid of a virus.
Well, alcohol is very effective and evaporates fairly rapidly too. So I would think that would be very effective for, as you say, like a mouthpiece. I think that would be perfect. Spraying it down the bore of a woodwind instrument, that might not be such a great thing though, you know. If a person had access to UV light, you know, it would be possible, I would think, to take the woodwind and situate them in such a way that the UV light was going through the bore, and that you could disinfect them fairly safely and readily by doing that. But I don't know that that's a very readily accessible tool for most folks.
And what about hydrogen peroxide? Is that as effective as alcohol or other disinfectants?
No. Not against this, not against the virus, no.
I think kind of to also echo what Paula said earlier too is, you know, just going back again to just the scientific research that we have now, but also, you know, so much is being done by so many experts in the world, you know, just to also go to Shawn's point of mental health in this, and, you know, keeping hope that even though this is an unprecedented situation, we really have every scientist in the world working on this right now. I know my friends who are epidemiologists here at University of Kansas, we've taken all of our labs and energy just at this one university. I'm sure it's at all the universities too, and we're really putting it towards solutions on this. So I think in the next few months, we're gonna know just even more than we already know, which is way more than we knew 3 months ago, about safety protocols. And again, just to kind of keep an eye on the science and solutions that are gonna come up. And it's such a fluid situation, our understanding of this and what's going to happen. And so I think we're going to keep having more solutions that might even be more effective as we understand it more.
One thing about this, the coronavirus is a particularly wily virus, and it changes, and the symptoms of it are so myriad. We didn't know for a while that it might cause anosmia, which is an inability to smell, that it might cause problems with taste. And who knew that it could cause people's toes to swell up and turn purple? You know, plus, now new evidence is showing that even people who have been infected and have antibodies, some of those people are still susceptible to being reinfected, which makes no sense whatsoever. So as you say, it's a good thing we've got a lot of very bright people working on this around the world, because there's a lot that we really do not know.
Sheri, can I ask you actually, so what is the deal from a scientific a doctor's point of view? Is this typical for a virus that you would, be able to have it and then get it again? Like, can you talk about that a little bit from a medical perspective? Is that normal?
It's extremely unusual. Usually if you get an infection from a virus, your body recovers, you develop immunity, antibodies. If your body sees that virus again, those antibodies kick in and take care of the problem. But with this, that's not it. It's not always the case. And I think that's mystifying a lot of people, myself among them. I don't know why it is that you can have antibodies to a specific virus, unless it is that the virus has mutated just enough that now it's different, and the antibody no longer fits the receptor on the virus. That would be my best guess. And like I said, it's a very wily virus. It's changing and mutating all the time.
So I want to switch gears just a little bit here to talking about self-care and mental health. I know Shawn is trained in Alexander technique, so maybe we could start with him. Anything that you want to share about that, and anyone else, please feel free to share your experiences. I know one of the most common questions we've received in nearly every single panel is, how do you stay motivated? How are you making it through this tough time? So anyone, please feel free to share your experiences and advice. And in the comments too, anyone watching, please feel free to share.
Sure. I think one of the most important things to pay attention to is how we respond to stress. We all have our own stress responses and how that manifests in tension through our body. And it's really important to understand that that becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. You have anxiety, it manifests in tension. The body then interprets that as anxiety. It reproduces an anxiety response. It produces more tension, and it just keeps going around and around and around. Especially as we start emerging from our homes and start interacting more, and particularly as musicians, we start interacting as musicians and playing in ensembles, either large or small. There's going to be some stress involved with that. There's going to be some fear. We're going to fall directly into our natural fear responses and our stress responses. If you're already susceptible to overuse injuries, or you're working with that within your clarinet playing, this is just going to magnify that more and more and more. So it really is an important time to pay attention to yourself in this process. Pay attention to your surroundings, especially as we think about, well, there's going to be a 6.5 feet radius around us. That's going to cause us to want to kind of squeeze in and stay in our space. So that's really important to just allow yourself to expand into that space, to not hold that tension in your body, to really pay attention to the fear of that and how you move with that information. It's just a time of greater awareness and paying more and more attention to yourself as you reemerge. Also pay attention to your comfort level. As we're starting to kind of come back out into social settings, it's very easy after 20 minutes or so of you just start getting closer and closer together. We're all in need of person-to-person contact right now. We're human beings. That's just part of our nature to be social and interactive. Be careful of getting comfortable, and just stay aware. When you stop playing, if you're in an ensemble situation, immediately put your mask on, because there's going to be a lot of aerosol going around the room. You know, just take those extra precautions all the time.
And if I can kind of jump on a little bit of what Shawn was saying from a different perspective, as a teacher who works a lot with younger students, one of the things I've been finding is not only that my own responses to stress and anxiety have really been amplified, but theirs have too. So something that I've been trying to think a lot about and even learn more about is how can I better support my students? So from that perspective, what I've been trying to do in my studio is I have an appointment for each of my students for their lessons, but especially, I mean, with the college students, you can tell them to text you, you can tell them, you know, that you're available whenever you like, but, and they can, as adults, make that choice to make that connection. But with my high school and my middle school students, what I've started doing is establishing a firmer connection with their parents, and making sure that I check in with them, not to the point where it becomes uncomfortable for them, but making sure that I understand what the child is going through at home, if there are any changes in the home environment with regard to financial stability, or even the emotional or mental stability of the child, insofar as the parent is willing to share with me, so that I can better support that child. And in an effort to learn even more, I've started, I have this book, it's Nurtured to Love. It's sort of like a learning, it's like a music ed resource I had from a few years ago that I sort of spent some time on, but it's a translated version of it from Shinichi Suzuki. And that's been really helpful as a really not product driven sort of environment in Texas, but in a way, I mean, the teaching that we do here is very, very measured, especially at that level, because there are so many expectations on those students. So you want to measure out your teaching to be sure that those students aren't, you know, reacting to anxiety even within normal situations. So I've been really trying to be a little bit more gentle and learn how to be more gentle for more kinds of students, so that I'm better at managing my own anxiety, but also trying to help them manage theirs.
Yeah, just to kind of get on to what everyone else is saying too, as well, is that this is definitely a time for, you know, increased compassion too, that, you know, everyone's dealing with so many unprecedented situations that they didn't have to deal with it before, you know, be it childcare, elder care, you know, somebody they know affected by the virus, and different stressors and anxieties, and definitely, you know, children that we're teaching, or college students, you know, what they're going through, people maybe also, you know, having to be a lot around roommates that they didn't expect that they were going to have to be in confinement with for 3 months, or so I think that compassion, and just realizing, just like Shawn was saying, just things we have to be much more aware of, like our personal space and how close we get to people when we're talking, and, you know, not just I know you've all heard this before too, not just a matter of keeping ourselves safe from the virus, but, you know, even if we feel that we're not worried or something, but, you know, just the simple act of wearing a mask not only protects us, but also protects the people around us as well. And it's definitely a time to kind of have that heightened awareness of how our sort of actions affect other people. And it can be a really beautiful time in that too, of just kind of being a little bit more self-aware.
So I see a wonderful comment from Rachel. It says maybe we could discuss how we can serve disadvantaged students who have less access to technology. So anything that people want to share on that? take some time to collect your thoughts. I know this is a tricky question, so if anyone wants to chime in the comments as well, please feel free to share. This isn't just open to panelists, so use the chat function. Like I said, Jessica and I are collecting all these resources, so if you know of any organizations or any resources or anything really, please do share.
You know, I think this is a wonderful forum to talk about something like this, and that, you know, that's obviously a big obstacle to learning right now. Somebody doesn't have a good internet connection or access to technology like this. So maybe this is something that we can kind of brainstorm as an organization. I certainly would love to be involved with this. Within our community right here, I haven't heard of a lot of initiatives yet, but I definitely think this is something that should be on the front burner to get going.
I've been trying to find a resource that I posted a couple weeks ago from Yamaha. They're doing an incredible initiative where they've got over $1 million dedicated to band directors to get larger instruments that are typically shared for students in the hands of those kids, so they don't have to go without being able to play at their home. So that includes bass clarinets and tubas and some of the more auxiliary, more expensive instruments. So they're basically putting grants and getting those instruments into the hands of those students. So honestly, that's, the technology is one thing, but some of these kids don't have access to the instrument that they typically would, especially if they rent. So maybe as an organization, you know, if you have a clarinet laying around, you want to send it to the ICA, we'll get it repaired, you know, work with some of our repair techs, get it repaired, and we can donate those to school districts that might need them. I have an instrument that I'm happy to throw in there that's just a plastic horn that I had around for marching band. So something like that might be one way that we can do that. Obviously financial support for people in that. And then we can also volunteer to do private lessons or to create packets or content that we can just hand out so that the students, you know, even if they can't connect to a weekly Zoom meeting, that they have the information that you are discussing. And we can do stuff by phone. I mean, sometimes the phone, even though it's not the most ideal thing, they could put the phone down and play for you, and you can provide comments or offer exercises to them. But I would love to hear what other people's suggestions or ideas in this, because we can obviously work together to make this possible. That's what's really great about this meeting and all the other meetings that we've had this week.
Absolutely. Something going along the sort of realm of the phone that I've been doing that's been fairly successful is working with, even if there isn't a great internet connection, a lot of people have access to some kind of phone. And on a lot of these current phones, something that we have that not as many students as I hoped would take advantage of it, that actually they have access to, are the sort of note-taking apps or like voice memo apps. And especially on iPhones of any generation, it's actually is a really great resource. So a student can, if they don't have a great internet connection, I had a student in the spring who was a senior who did not have an internet connection at home, but she did have a phone. And then when her phone broke, she used her mother's phone, and she would make recordings of herself, and I would make recordings of things and send them back and forth. And even though it is in a way a little bit primitive, I mean, she was using the same types of skills that we would be using if we were doing a virtual lesson. She was really listening. She was having to do a lot of critical thinking and even a lot more review. We were able to integrate her making recordings and then sending the notes that she would take on her cell phone to me about what she heard, so then we could sort of talk through that over the phone. So even though visually I really couldn't see a lot, although she could have taken a video as well, she had a harder time with that because they didn't really have a lot of furniture in their home, to be honest. So, but a lot of people do have access to phones, so I have found that to be fairly successful.
This was exactly how I ran my studio for the remainder of the semester, was doing recordings like this and having the students respond to their own recordings when they sent them to me, and then we would meet together and discuss them and then talk about strategies for what they were going to do for the next week. It actually worked really well. It created a sense of ownership and worked on their own reflective skills.
I had that same experience too this last year, where I actually even had some students that seemed to work better in sending a recording than doing the live, you know, lesson where you're struggling and it's cutting out and everything. And sometimes I would respond by voice, and sometimes I would just even email it out, you know, and go back, you know, in bar 20, you know, it's a little bit sharp on the F, and then, you know, you rush at the end of the bar and stuff like that. And then they would go back and listen. And in some ways, of course, it's difficult outcomes and lessons, but in some ways we got a lot more done in fixing rhythm. I don't know if you kind of all feel like this too. It was that thing that we always kind of talked about in lessons, which is record yourself, really record yourself. And finally, everyone really, really recorded themselves and would come back and say, oh, you know, I finally hear that I am clipping the dotted eighth. And it was a really good way to work. I found it sometimes more relaxing for myself as a professor to email that back. And if I needed to play something, maybe then to actually do a recording and demonstrate it. But I thought it was a pretty good way to work.
Now might be a good time to talk about equipment and technology. I'm seeing a lot of great resources about apps and things like that. I know in the forums that I'm seeing and joined on Facebook, I've seen what equipment, what microphone, what this, what that. So if anyone wants to share, type in the comments, anything at all. Favorite microphones, favorite apps, favorite technology.
Jenny, are these comments available? They're available after this, right? Because I want to watch this and it's hard to look on a panel, you know, to see all the great equipment that people have out there. Do we get access to the
Jessica and I are putting a list together, so I don't know if we could access the chats, but as it's going through, I know both Jessica and I are copying and pasting and like writing down and making a list for everything. So we will send that resource out after it's over, probably later next week. It will be posted on the website, and we're going to email this to everyone that registered for the event. But if we post the list and you see something missing, of course we can update that. So yes, we will share this with everyone.
You know, just while I'm unmuted, I'll just go ahead and just say my just tiny observations about equipment. Just, you know, if you're going to use Zoom or FaceTime or any of the other dualities on the internet, just to make sure that, for me at least, I had to close down a lot of other windows to make sure I would have a good connection. I found that it was really essential for my way of teaching and for my students to have the music, the same version that they were looking off of. So we would always have them measure the number of the measures and then send me a copy of that music ahead of time. So instead of saying, oh, well, you know where you go la 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 la, no, not la 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 la, but la la la, you know, you could say bar 16, you know, and that just seemed to make things a lot more efficient. Personally, and I would love to hear other comments on this, I had to mess around with the settings quite a bit in Zoom to make it not cut out in clarinet lessons and kind of go back to original settings. I still feel personally that I get a lot better connection on FaceTime and seem to prefer it for clarinet. And it seems like Zoom, if I do use Zoom, which seems to be kind of what students prefer, is they seem to prefer Zoom a lot more than FaceTime. It's just so essential to have people sitting farther away from the mic. So I'd love to get other people's kind of thoughts on that.
I think one of the simple things that I didn't even think about until someone suggested it is we're now old school. We actually discovered that we have data drops. When our house was built, we're still doing Wi-Fi. So I got the Apple connector and connected directly via Ethernet for Zoom and all of this stuff, and it's worked great. Before that, I had the same issues that Stephanie just mentioned, cutting in and out, and my students would say, Professor Corley, you know, you'll be talking and then you'll stop for 30 seconds. You know, so I think that is a good thing if you can do that, connect directly. Someone else suggested to me, if you have Wi-Fi, that you sit as close as possible to the router. These are simple things that we didn't know about. An inexpensive mic that I really like is the Yeti, and it works really well. And well, it's not inexpensive, but probably inexpensive compared to most. So, and it works well for a number of applications.
I just have a small comment from this student perspective. So I'm still taking lessons at UNT and with Professor Fabian, and it was just so nice when the quarantine started to be able to still have that consistent studio class all the time. So thank you to all the clarinet professors that are out there that just like stuck through all of these technology issues and made it work, because it really meant a lot to myself, and I'm sure a bunch of other students out there, just having that consistency and still getting to take lessons and doing everything that we could as normally as possible.
And Jessica and I were talking about that earlier in the warm-up panel. We got a little bit emotional talking about how we had to cancel Clarinet Fest this year. But I think the greatest thing for me throughout all of this has been social media and staying in touch with all of my friends and seeing all the creative ways that people are using technology to share resources now and connecting with their friends and people they don't know and participating on forums and joining groups. I've even had some students of mine do virtual recitals, and they played arrangements of Animal Crossing music, or they're being so inventive and creative. So I think that has been the best thing that has come out of this for me, is just feeling like I'm maybe even more connected than I would have been before all of this. So if you aren't actively engaged on social media, then I would consider that, or just connecting with your friends or giving them, I'm sure you're talking to people more than you might have before all of this, but just staying involved in the clarinet community. That's sort of why we did this event, because it would be too sad not to have any place for us to gather together. And I've been seeing so many wonderful Instagram lives and Facebook lives and interviews and podcasts and discussions. So I think that's really helped me personally.
I actually just remembered when I was at Midwest Festival in December last year, I went over to a booth to introduce myself for a company called Flat. And Flat is the Google Drive for music notation software. And I had completely forgotten about that. But you can actually, similar to Drive, you can actually collaboratively work on a music arrangement. So that might be something that people might be interested in. I'll share the link in the chat for that, but it's certainly a unique software.
Much like Stephanie, I've had a really good time using FaceTime to teach lessons. My students have really enjoyed it. But I have been using Zoom for actual studio classes, even for high school students. Even though we wouldn't typically meet as a group, it's nice for them to meet as not just a band and not just a section, but as the entire sort of studio, people who take lessons. And sometimes the studio ends up degrading into people sort of chatting together, but I think it's important to establish that kind of camaraderie. And in the same way, a lot of the students are really familiar with Google and sort of the Google Classroom kind of bundle. So something I started using during this that I hadn't used before was Google Duo. And I found that the sound is actually not bad there. I think it does depend a lot on your connection, and being hardwired in is really important. But I've had some success with Google Duo for anyone who maybe would be interested in trying that.
Does anyone have any recommendations for mobile applications, metronomes, tuners, and things like that they can utilize on phones for students, or recommend for students?
Everybody already knows, I'm sure, about tonal energy, right? The tonal energy app. Yeah, that's my favorite.
Any other apps that people have been enjoying?
I haven't used it recently, but there's an app called Modacity that just helps you like track your practice. That's kind of fun if you're one of those people that really likes streaks. Like I'm obsessed with my move streak on my Apple Watch. I just hit 100 days yesterday. But things like that, if you're motivated by challenging yourself in that way, that might be a good option to check out.
One of my pet projects was to create a fingering chart app, and that's free on Apple and on Android, and I'll share the links there. It's called Clarinetists Fingering Companion, and you can screenshot and save fingering charts and send them to your students when you're trying to explain in a really like just like a image friendly.
So I have a little bit more of a lighthearted question. We were talking before this panel started. Has anyone developed any fun hobbies or had any fun projects that you've done the last several months, whether or not they're clarinet related? I've been seeing all the wonderful things that people have been baking, some cool home redesigns and things like that, but anyone in the comments?
Well, I kept another human alive, a young child. So that was basically my project. You know, a lot of parents were definitely, that's kind of taking up a lot of the time when we're not thinking about clarinet. And so a lot of the hobbies I've done have been, you know, kind of the 5-year-old variety.
We adopted a dog. We took on a new puppy. Got him at 8 weeks old, and it's been like I sort of equate it to a little baby without a diaper. it's just, um, it's around the clock care for a new, it's a golden doodle. So it's adorable, but wow, a lot of work.
I saw someone comment carrot clarinet. I hope you attended the trivia panel last night. We had a whole conversation about carrot clarinets. We were planning a new world record for largest carrot clarinet ensemble. So if anyone makes a video of them playing the carrot clarinet, we would love to see it. So please share it with us. Maybe another question that can be humorous. Anyone feel free to share it on this. What have been some embarrassing or nightmare teacher moments from teaching online, maybe tech failures or anything funny that you want to share?
Nobody wants to share that. It's too embarrassing.
No
I mean,
one?
90% of the time when I'm teaching a lesson, my dog decides that mortal peril is upon us and just starts, barking uncontrollably, and I just have to, mute myself and be like, give me a second, this is apparently something is really bad wrong, that it's literally just someone else is outside. There's another dog outside. Hello, I'm a dog. Did you know that I live here?
I'm seeing
That's my
some funny
favorite.
comments. Oh no, a cat barfed during a recording, kids running shirtless across the background. I know for me it wasn't an embarrassing moment, but I was doing a virtual recital on Instagram and I prepared a background. It was much fancier than what you see behind me, and I had plants and like wall decorations and it looked really nice. And it was right by my backyard where my neighbor lives. And right around the time the concert was supposed to start, they had construction start. So I had to frantically move my entire setup just so there wouldn't be construction noise during all of that. No one else cares to share, that's fine too. Maybe the moments were too embarrassing to share on here. That's perfectly fine. So let's talk a little bit about what we see the future of clarinet being in all of this, the good, the bad, the ugly. Any advice or anything that you personally plan to do going forward? Any studies that anyone wants to share? Anything at all?
Well, just from my perspective, I do think, this time it's not gonna last forever, and, how we deal with the virus and things like that. Like this is not gonna go on for our entire lives. Like some things are gonna go back. So just to I'm trying to look at it and with my students as kind of the positives that we can get out of this time, which, Jenny, you were talking about staying in touch with people that maybe you haven't before. Just the sheer act of doing this on Zoom, it's interesting to see everyone's houses and what you show on camera. And there's something kind of demystifying and sweet about this time to kind of see people's homes. And I don't know if you've had this too, when you look at celebrities that are hosting shows from their house. It's nice to see Tom Hanks' kitchen. It's really sweet. It's something that we never had a chance to do. And so, and then when it comes to clarinet pedagogy, this definitely is a serious time that we're musicians and we're not playing music together. There's no way to sugarcoat that this is an easy time, but that there is a lot of stuff that we can work on our own. I had an arm injury when I was a sophomore in college, and my old teacher, David Peck at Rice, he said to me, he's like, don't worry about what you're losing in this, 2 months that you're gonna have to take off from the instrument, but enhance everything else in your life. So this isn't minor, Jenny, when you and Jessica, when you're talking about what are the things do you enjoy outside of clarinet, when we get back to the normal, whatever that looks like again, you're not going to have a lot of time to really adequately learn how to cook, to feed yourself as a musician. Also, a lot of things can be done without playing next to each other on clarinet. Looking at scores. My teacher had me do a really in-depth listening, looking. That's where I really got to know all of orchestral repertoire in a way that I couldn't when I was practicing clarinet all the time. So listening to music, listening with a score, comparing different recordings, really working on my rhythm, really working on fundamentals. Thank goodness we do have all this technology where you can record yourself and you can finally really flatten that chin like you've been meaning to, or stop dropping your tongue. Like this is really the time that you can get done. And then outside of clarinet, you can really take care of so much stuff that we're just all so busy that we don't get a chance to do in our normal lives.
Stephanie, you mentioning the flat chin actually had me, I had a question that maybe some of you all could help me with. When I'm teaching my private lessons, one of the things that I find the most challenging is actually finding a good angle to have the student play so that I can see what's happening here. I have a student who's currently learning altissimo, and so there's so much stuff that happens in this area and on the inside that I just can't see. So if you guys have suggestions on how we can better approach some of those hard to teach concepts and what has worked for you for that, I would certainly be interested to know.
I would just say to everybody, have conversations, real conversations. I've stopped texting and setting up, and now I'm calling or doing face-to-face things with people, because just being able to connect like we've done today in this hour is uplifting for everybody. And the other thing I would say is take time to look at other things that interest you. The reason why the echo is so big in here, I moved out all the furniture. I bought myself a set of weights. So I'm trying to get healthy and working on my core and some things that will help me play better, and taking an interest there. And then other than that, I take a few minutes every day to walk out on my porch and see what wildlife has walked up for dinner. Usually it's a fox or a peacock, have a lot of deer. Unfortunately, I have a raccoon that comes and raids stuff. So, but anyway, converse with people, connect with people, let them see your face. And it will do wonders for lifting your mood all the time.
I'd like to echo how important physical exercise and activity is, not just during this period, but especially during this period. Certainly, we were talking earlier about issues of anxiety and depression, and exercise is one of the absolute best things that you can do for yourself. It doesn't have to, I mean, you don't have to go to the gym and become a gym rat, but just going out for a brisk walk, taking the dog for a walk. I grew very much closer to my dog, taking her out for really long walks. And I've also annoyed the living daylights out of my horses. They really hope that this thing will be over soon so that they can spend more time grazing and less time with me on their backs. That is the ultimate in social distancing, I'm here to tell you. But going forward, I think the most important thing is be vigilant. Be vigilant and take care of yourself. Never forget that playing the clarinet isn't just about where your chin is. It isn't just about how you breathe. It takes your entire body to play the clarinet. And I'm sure Shawn, with his background in Alexander technique, would, at least I hope he'll agree with me, that is the case. Okay, 2 thumbs up from Shawn. And don't lose sight of the fact that it takes your entire body to really play the clarinet. If you just emphasize on lightning fast fingers or a machine gun speed tongue, yeah, that'll get you so far. But to really play, you have to engage your entire self. And so in order to do that, you have to stay healthy. And in the coming period where there's so much uncertainty about what the virus is going to do, are there going to be more cases, is there going to be another surge? We don't know about these things, but we do know that we can take care of ourselves. And that should be a very reassuring mindset to assume. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, one of the most simple things that you can do is just go for a walk and get your joints moving in their full range of motion, at least once or twice a day. Go for a hike. It's safe to be outside. But we're all working in close quarters now in our homes. We're probably not sitting in the best chairs that we're used to in our studios. We may not have music stands. Who knows what our actual conditions are? We may even be conscientious of people around us and playing softer or doing something in our bodies that in some way diminishes what we would normally be doing in a performance setting. You've got to have a way around that. You've got to have a way to move out of that. So take some time for yourself. Also, it's a good time to read a book. It's a good time to do all of the other things that you can't do if you're in school. It's also a good time to learn a new etude book that you've always wanted to study. I have a huge list of repertoire that my students play that I've never been able to play that I'm actually going back and learning. It's always fun for me when I'm like, oh, I haven't played that. Something like the Rebot or something. I just haven't done it. And so it's a great time to learn those extra things that I wasn't able to do.
Just to go back to what Jessica was asking, and with the horn angle and kind of what works, from just a teaching perspective, because that is such a big thing, right? They'll be like sitting and you don't really see anything that's going on. So I had to kind of finagle my own studio as to what would work for like a student to be able to see me in full range. And for me, it's having my laptop up on a stand, and then I had to get to know lighting and what was going to work. But something that really worked for me in my studio, and I know it worked for my TAs and some of my colleagues too, was sending out protocol for this new era. For example, I redid my syllabus, and even things just like setup of the musicians. Instead of telling your students one by one, well, this is how I want you to set up and what we're going to do, sending that out to everyone. And then other really important things like HIPAA protocols, like don't ever post pictures of your students without, ever, well, don't do it ever. But when we have like these Zoom meetings, you really have to make sure to get even permissions from adults really before you repost pictures of anyone. And then also for my students, I wanted them kind of, in somewhat professional dress, for lessons, and also to make sure that we were having lessons in a living area as well, not in a sleeping area, and kind of what was going on in the background as well too. And that, would take sometimes some finagling of the equipment before a lesson. And so if I sent them this in a syllabus or kind of lesson policies, that helped them kind of take care of this ahead of time. And to explain what Jessica's talking about too, which is, I need to see your chin, I need to see your throat, and I kind of need to see your fingers and your posture and all that stuff too. That seemed to help, so the student would have some time before the lesson to think about the setup, because again, some of our students have less access than others and are in really small areas, and it's not hard for them to, it's not easy for them to kind of get all this stuff straight, or they wouldn't have a nice tripod for their computer or for their iPad or for their phone or something. And so kind of they have to think about putting it up on a windowsill, and how much can they actually see. So for me specifically, it seemed to kind of work if the student was at an angle, and if they could have the device kind of raised, almost like what Meghan has going on right now, where it's like the device seems to be raised a little bit more too, and that would allow me to see a little bit more of the profile of the chin and the throat, and also see the hands. That seemed to kind of planning those things ahead of time help me kind of help them a little bit more in the lesson.
I think there was another really good question earlier about studio classes, and how does that look and work for you all? I'm certainly interested to hear how you manage multiple performances and discussions with your students in that kind of setting.
And maybe on top of that, I saw another question, maybe it was the same one, but keeping your students engaged.
Motivation is difficult, right? I mean, let's all face it, there is no magic cure, but I think that you have to be inventive and talk to the student about what their interests are. For instance, I have my two students for summer school, we're not allowed to do in-person lessons at TLU, so it's all online. So they're about to go out and student teach in the fall because their degrees are in music education. So we came up with a project where they are looking at repertoire that's appropriate for middle school and high school students. They play the solo for me every week, and then we go through and identify the prerequisites needed for the student to be able to play that piece. And they're writing up not necessarily a detailed guide, but they're putting together all these pieces so they'll have something that when they walk out, if they get to walk out in the fall and teach, that they can refer to for students. And we're looking at appropriate ensembles too. They're going to record all the parts of one clarinet quartet and look at that and look at the performance issues. So I think it's important to be inventive, but also ask the student, you know, what can I do to make it better for you? And what would you think would be important in your life going forward?
I found that our studio classes using the share screen function of Zoom was really effective. The students would submit recordings to me, and then I would broadcast them for the studio to watch and respond to. Was also an opportunity for us to review online performances together as a class and discuss that. It actually turned out to be quite effective. And going back to kind of the recording thing for private lessons, that actually turned out to be a pretty good motivator for the students, because they would actually listen back and go, oh wait, no, that doesn't sound good. Let me do that again, and let me do that again. And so it actually turned out to be highly motivating for them.
I know with my studio too, I would give virtual studio classes, and sometimes I would just send out an email with information for them to read during the semester at their own leisure, because I know that they were getting all kinds of other assignments from their other teachers too. But I think part of it too, I tried to really help them find maybe other interests of theirs within the clarinet world. Like one week I made a studio class and it was a virtual scavenger hunt. Find the worst stock photo of a clarinetist, find a piece by a composer you've never heard of, find a piece written by a woman, find a piece written before 1850 or anything like that. And I had criteria, but I left it up to them to complete the assignment and hopefully discover things that they weren't aware of before.
These are such great ideas. That's awesome. You know, for me, I thought it was really important to have our live studio class. Also, I think, I don't know if it was Megan or who's mentioned this before, you know, also from a teacher's perspective, it was important for us also to see you guys in lessons and in studio class as well, you know, to kind of have that feeling of continuity. I'm probably not the only one here who almost had a sense of mourning at the end of the semester that I really missed teaching, maybe even more than in a normal semester. But my approach to studio class is I got a lot of guest artists to come in and do my class by Zoom. I got David Schifrin and Frank Kowalski and Miriam Adam and Michael Wayne, and you know, people that in the past it would be so hard with funding to get them to come in to do something, because you'd have to pay for travel and, you know, fee and everything. And so that was kind of exciting, and all of you here and probably people in the chat are going to be hit up for coming in and doing my studio class if we're doing it online. You know, who knows what we're going to look like in fall. But that was that seemed to kind of make it fun and sort of festive that we would have these other artists come in and do the class. So it made it exciting for me as well.
Any other ways that people have been keeping their students engaged? I got distracted a little bit. I'm trying to find the studio class. I'll share that just in a second.
We did, instead of juries, we it was kind of left up to individual instructors as what we would do for kind of the final assessment, and different people did sort of different things for that assessment. For me, I worked with my students to maybe work on a different project, what they would be interested in. So one of them used this recording software to do a quartet arrangement of Bohemian Rhapsody, you know, himself. And the only criteria was you couldn't interact with another person to do this. You couldn't collaborate live with someone else. And another student did like some Bosnian folk tunes transcribed for clarinet and kind of talked about these. And that was really exciting, again, for me as a professor to see what my students came up with and stuff that was really more personal maybe than sometimes the standard repertoire that we were doing all the time in normal studio.
I'm seeing some wonderful suggestions in the comments. This is all really good. I think the cool thing about doing a virtual event like this is just learning from everyone, the real sense of community, and hearing all of the panelists share their knowledge and expertise. But in the comments too, I'm seeing so many great ideas, and I hope everyone that's attending is feeling inspired. I think we can all agree that we went through at least somewhat of a rough patch. Maybe we haven't played our clarinet as consistently as we would have liked. Maybe it's been sitting in its case since March. That's totally fine. But I know I've been really inspired just seeing everyone, even if it's just through a computer screen, the last couple of days. And Jessica and I are planning on making things like this more regular in the future. So we've already talked about more regular virtual events, more regular trivia contests or things like that. So if anyone has any ideas or suggestions for this, any topics you would like us to have a panel about, or any artists you would like us to invite, or anything at all, just please let us know. I'll type in our email addresses too, but I'll open this for anyone that wants to share anything really, any advice, any suggestions, anything that you've been doing to maintain motivation, any sources of inspiration you found during this.
One thing, it's not necessarily an inspiration, but that I've been really trying to, when I get reputable information, whether it's science-based or whether it's just information about really how to care for our own bodies or for our students, I've been really trying to share that with the band directors that I work directly with, as well as my colleagues. Because I think in the clarinet community, it seems like we've done a good job, and higher ed has done a really good job, having Facebook groups and, creating all different kinds of ways to stay in touch. But what I found is in the other realms, with my colleagues that are teaching advanced high school lessons and other types of lessons that are out there in the public schools, is they don't necessarily have access in this same way, because I know in Texas this is a way of life, but it isn't necessarily that way for everyone. So I've been trying to really use this opportunity to create a little bit more awareness about things that I've wanted my parents and students and the people that I work with to kind of be aware of anyway. So I've kind of started a newsletter that I send out, not to necessarily everyone, but that I share with colleagues and that I share with my band directors. And I don't call it a newsletter because it sounds so outmoded, but that just has some information in it that I've sort of discovered, and it's created conversations that I don't think would have happened otherwise. So I think that that's probably would be my advice, is to just make sure we're not just sharing with other clarinet players, because I think clarinet players are really good at that, but making sure we're sharing with everyone, especially the people who have some decision-making power.
I think that's really important. If you see disinformation specifically, don't be afraid to call it out, because it's really important. If you know the facts about that information, or you can point someone in the direction of that, please don't be afraid to share. And sometimes you're going to get pushback. I completely understand that, because this is a very sensitive time on a lot of different issues, but you have to be brave and let people know the facts about certain things if you do know, because there's so much disinformation out there, and it can be really difficult to tell what is the truth and what's not. So pointing people directly to resources, the CDC, for example, heavily rely on the CDC's information because it is up to date. And also Johns Hopkins University has some great resources. Just don't be afraid to share those things with people who you think may have a misinterpretation of what is actually happening.
And I see a really good question here for Dr. Rolf. Can you talk about your thoughts on a face shield versus a mask for teaching clarinet in person?
Well, I think it all comes down to a matter of comfort. It's really taxing to wear a face mask for a long period of time. It's just uncomfortable. And not that a face shield is comfortable, it isn't really either. I don't know that there's a huge advantage of one over the other, the advantage of the face shield is it's going to protect the wearer more. The face mask is going to probably be a little more effective at preventing the spread of droplets. But the shield is actually going to do both. So the shield is a really good thing.
I was just going to add to that as far as the research, and I'm trying to remember this without looking at my notes. In the study that I mentioned earlier, they also looked at singers and actors. And it was very interesting. They floated fog in front of the singers when they were singing, and they asked them to sing soft and loud, use what they call explosive consonants and things like that. And this may not be exactly right, but as I remember, what they found is that there was a little bit of disturbance in the fog if it was really loud and it was really percussive, like what they were saying or speaking, but it was so minor, it was a very minor. They also put the fog, again, 6 feet away, and they recorded no disturbance at all. So I don't know exactly, I'd have to go back and look at the study, but I thought that was really interesting to note that somebody's voice, which I mean, it's different, you're blowing into an instrument. And also to remind people, there are going to be a lot of studies, but be sure you look at them, because right now they're thinking woodwinds in particular, when you blow into the instrument, has a low risk of transmission because the droplets don't come from your mouth when you're blowing into a woodwind instrument, except for flute. And it does.
Someone just mentioned that they'd seen medical professionals wear both a mask and a face shield. And yes, that's very true. And if I were dealing with a group of patients that were known to be infected with COVID-19, I would be wearing both. For most purposes, I think that is overkill. That's just my own personal opinion. The whole aerosol thing, as we do more and more testing, I think that we will probably be more comfortable in dialing dialing back a little bit, and saying, okay, I can do either, I can do or, and we'll be fine. The problem with the testing is it only tells you if you're positive during that particular moment when you do the swab. And so there's still a lot of things to be worked out with this virus, a lot. We just really have to be cognizant of the fact that we don't know everything about this, and exercise an overabundance of caution to protect ourselves and others as well.
I want to echo that too. Seeing some of the, sorry, Jenny.
Oh no, I was just going to say, you could read in the comments. We had a comment from Facebook that's actually very true, that we should all be very careful giving medical advice as public university clarinet professors. So I'll let everyone read that in the comments. Sorry, Stephanie.
And I wanted to say that too, and for people that are kind of tuning in later, that we did talk about this right at the very beginning. The absolute only thing that all of us said was absolutely look at the actual research that's coming out, and that none of us are at all giving an opinion on the safety of this. That's really important, and that's something we did right at the very beginning, so people that are coming in a little bit later might not have seen right at the very beginning that we are absolutely saying how little we know about the science behind this, and none of us are saying anything about the actual safety of anything scientifically, and that we're just going to have to see a lot of the research that's coming out right now. And something we talked about right at the very beginning was this these studies that are being done right now on aerosols, that again are just being done by the highest minds in science right now. One of the ones is a big one that all the scientists are pointing to in Colorado. That's a really concerted effort on the study of aerosols and COVID-19. And so in no way are we giving any sort of medical advice.
So I hate to do this because I feel like this has been a really informative discussion, but does anyone have any final comments they'd like to make, or any final questions that people type really quickly into the comments section? Just any final parting words, maybe words of wisdom or encouragement for everyone.
I have a great quote from Boris Alakavadian. I talked to him when all of this started, and he said something that I thought was just really heartfelt. He said that for him, everything had changed because what he's doing now and practicing now is different from what he did before, you know, when he had regular concerts. And he said he thinks that this is an opportunity for us to reflect on ourselves and our music, and to think about what's really important in life. And he also said, believe in your dream, you know, because he said that this will change, and it will. How it's going to change, nobody knows, but it will change. So even though it's difficult to be positive, I think we can all dig down and find a way.
I'll piggyback on that. I think as a society, we were moving at a pace that we just couldn't sustain. We see it all around. And it's okay for all of us to pause. It's okay. And to reconnect with ourselves, to reconnect with the loved ones around us, and to build those connections. The arts, they'll endure. They always have. Hopefully, we won't go back to normal, but hopefully what will come will be even more beautiful. It will grow. We'll find a way. We just have to be patient.
I want to echo that too, that there are so many just wonderful positives in this really tumultuous time that we can take out of it. We are going to come out of this, and we are going to be okay. And, you know, there's the situation that we have, we can't do much to control what we're in right now, but we can definitely find a lot of positives in this new kind of world that we're in right now. And the arts have been through a lot. They've always been here, as humans went through a lot of pandemics and upheavals and wars. And music's still here, and we're going to be here at the end of it. And it's not going to be easy, and we just have to kind of get through this time and kind of use the advantages that we can in this time.
After all, it's just a virus, and music is much greater than a virus.
That was really beautiful. I know that we might be tired of hearing this. We're all in this together. We've probably heard that millions of times a day. But I truly think there's a reason behind it. Maybe it's starting to lose a little bit of the meaning, but I think this weekend has proved that we really are all in this together. We've had these wonderful panelists. We've had some great comments from everyone. And the purpose of this was to bring everyone together, whether it's, you know, it's not in real life, unfortunately, but through this Zoom webinar. I think this has been a really enlightening set of discussions. And I just really want to thank all of the panelists, everyone who attended, for sharing all of their opinions, expertise, advice, words of wisdom, inspirations, anything like that. So let's give a virtual round of applause for all of the panelists that have shared their time here today. I really appreciate all of you joining us for this. I see all the comments going very quickly. Thank you all, everyone, for attending. So we have one panel left. It's been a whirlwind of 3 days of the weekend. It's been really fun to put together with Jessica. We have one final panel that will be in about an hour and a half at 5 o'clock Eastern time, and that is going to be creating clarinet content online. So I hope you'll all join us for that. You should be able to use all of the links on social media to register for that Zoom meeting. We'll be broadcasting on Facebook too. And as we said earlier, these will be posted on the YouTube channel afterwards. As soon as Jessica and I have time to go through and compile all these resources, we will get that out to everyone, post it on social media, post it on the website, email it to everyone who registered for this. What else am I forgetting? Don't forget to shop our Threadless store. Don't forget to check out the virtual exhibit hall. Don't forget to follow us on social media. I think a big part of this was staying in the community, staying involved. So if you're not already following our Facebook page or the Instagram page, please do. I think it's a wonderful place. So especially Instagram, I've really enjoyed working with that recently and seeing all the great content that people are putting out. Facebook too, but feel free to follow us. And thank you, everyone. Is there anything else, Jessica?
I just wanted to let you all know, if you're not a member of the ICA, we would love to have you, but that's certainly not a requirement, as I know things are financially tough for a lot of people right now. But if you have questions about anything, comments, please provide us feedback. We're going to send a survey out to anybody that participated on ways that we can make this better going forward, ways that we can incorporate this into Clarinet Fest. And also things that didn't work, please don't be shy. We can take the criticism because we can't grow without that criticism, right? So, and this is something that we certainly want to do in the future. So if you have ideas or things that you want to learn about, please let us know. We'll get it together. We'll put a panel together. If you want to see a masterclass with somebody or talk about a specific concept, anything, coffee talk, we can have like little panels where we just come in and play something for each other. We can do all of that, and we're ready to do that. So yeah. That's really all I have.
Yeah, so please let us know. Again, round of applause for all the panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your time, knowledge, wisdom with all of us. And we will see you in about an hour and a half for the final panel of ICA Plays On.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.